Fear is heavier than most people realize. It sits quietly beneath the surface of your life, shaping decisions, influencing emotions, and even affecting your prayers without you consciously noticing. You might tell yourself that you are trusting God, that you are walking in faith, that you are following His guidance. On the outside, everything may look obedient, organized, and disciplined. But underneath, fear whispers its subtle lies. It convinces you that you need to control outcomes, double-check every decision, or prepare for every possible failure. And because fear is so quiet, it often goes unnoticed until it begins to weigh down your spirit. The truth is, you are carrying more fear than you admit, and it is holding you back from the fullness of trust and peace God intends for your life. Consider the way fear affects your daily actions. You may find yourself hesitating to take steps that God has clearly called you to take, simply because the unknown feels too uncomfortable. You may delay conversations that need honesty, avoid financial risks that are necessary, or remain silent in situations where you should speak up. Even in prayer, fear can sneak in, subtly framing your requests around doubt or anxiety rather than confident trust. You might be asking God for guidance, but your heart is still calculating worst-case scenarios and imagining all the ways things could go wrong. This is the quiet tyranny of fear. It hides in the margins of your obedience, convincing you that you are faithful, when in reality your faith is limited by the weight of what you have not confronted. Fear also has a way of distorting your perception of others. You may see people succeeding, walking in confidence, or living without visible worry, and feel inadequate or anxious in comparison. You might convince yourself that their success is based purely on talent, luck, or circumstance, when in truth, fear plays a role in every life, just as it does in yours. The difference is that some people are unwilling to acknowledge it openly, and others have begun to confront it directly with God. The key is not comparison. The key is awareness, recognizing that fear is present, naming it for what it is, and bringing it into the light is the first step toward reclaiming the space in your heart that belongs to God. Your fears are often tied to things that matter deeply: relationships, finances, your reputation, your future, or even your spiritual standing. You may fear failure, judgment, rejection, or loss. Each of these fears carries subtle power over your thoughts and actions. They can make you overthink, overplan, or over-control situations that God never intended for you to manage alone. The Bible reminds us repeatedly that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. Yet fear convinces us that weakness is something to hide, something to compensate for, rather than a place to surrender. When fear controls you, you are effectively living in the tension between what God has promised and what your heart secretly doubts. This tension is exhausting, and it is often why the feeling that something is off appears in your life even when everything seems right externally. Think about your faith practices. You may pray diligently, give generously, and participate fully in your community, yet still feel an internal unease. This is because fear can inhabit the spaces where obedience is meant to flow freely. It can sit quietly in your motives, making your acts of faith conditional on your own calculations and security measures. You might say, "I am doing all the right things," but fear undermines the purity of your trust. When you finally admit to yourself that fear is present, it is not an admission of weakness. It is an opportunity to identify what is controlling you, to release it, and to reclaim your spiritual freedom. God is not surprised by your fear. He is not disappointed. He is waiting for you to bring it into the light so He can transform it into confidence, peace, and clarity. Another aspect of fear is its ability to shape your expectations of life and God. You may subconsciously believe that God's provision should meet your timelines, or that His answers should align perfectly with your understanding. When they do not, fear amplifies doubt and insecurity. You may start to question your faith, second-guess your choices, or cling to what you can control. The Bible shows us many examples of God working in ways that are unexpected, delayed, or challenging, but always purposeful. Fear often convinces you that delay is denial and that uncertainty is abandonment. This is a lie. Recognizing this allows your heart to begin separating fear from truth and obedience from anxiety. Also, consider the cost of hiding your fear from yourself and from God. The more you deny it, the more power it gains. It affects decisions quietly, influences your words, and shapes your emotions in ways you do not always recognize. It can distort your perception of reality and prevent you from experiencing the fullness of trust, joy, and peace that God offers. The first step toward freedom is awareness. Naming the fear, feeling it, and confronting it with honesty before God is not a sign of failure. It is the gateway to spiritual growth. Once fear is acknowledged and placed under God's authority, the space it occupied is freed for trust, courage, and action aligned with His will. So, it is time to examine how it subtly directs your decisions and reactions. Fear is like an invisible ruler, quietly shaping how you interact with the world. You may find yourself avoiding opportunities that could stretch your faith because the risk feels too great. You might delay conversations that matter because you anticipate conflict or rejection. Even in the simplest interactions, fear can dictate your tone, your words, and your willingness to engage honestly with others. It is quiet, deceptive, and persistent, and that is why it has been allowed to grow unnoticed. Understanding its influence is not about shame. It is about clarity. Awareness creates the opportunity for transformation. Look at your financial decisions. Fear often masquerades as caution. You might tell yourself that budgeting, saving, or overplanning is being responsible. But in reality, these behaviors are frequently fueled by anxiety about scarcity. Each financial choice can be subtly tainted by worry and insecurity. You may hesitate to give, invest, or trust in God's provision because fear whispers that loss is imminent. This type of fear silently steals confidence, joy, and peace, keeping you in a state of constant tension. God does not want you to live under this weight. He wants your heart fully surrendered, so that trust can replace fear, faith can replace doubt, and peace can replace anxiety. Consider the way fear shapes your perception of yourself. You may judge your own actions, feeling inadequate or not spiritual enough because you still experience anxiety, doubt, or uncertainty. The inner voice that critiques, measures, and compares is often fear speaking in disguise. It convinces you that you are failing when your heart is actually alive and sensitive to God's guidance. This internal struggle is precisely where God's refining work begins. The discomfort you feel, the tension you cannot explain, is a sign that your heart is ready for a deeper encounter with trust, obedience, and faith that is not dependent on circumstances or control. Fear also affects the way you relate to others. You may hesitate to speak truth, confront issues, or offer vulnerability in relationships because you anticipate judgment or rejection. It can create a subtle barrier between you and the people God wants to use to bless, challenge, or support you. Fear prevents authentic connection, leaving isolation in its wake. Recognizing this influence is essential because it is often invisible, yet its impact is real. When you bring these fears into the light, particularly in prayer and reflection, you begin to dismantle the invisible walls that have kept you separated from others and from God. As guidance, prayer is another arena where fear quietly exerts control. You may speak the words, follow the routines, and recite the promises, yet your heart may be holding back. Fear of disappointment, fear of unanswered prayers, and fear of appearing weak can subtly alter the way you approach God. You might pray conditionally, with an internal checklist, or with expectations that mirror your own control rather than true surrender. This type of prayer keeps you in a place of spiritual tension rather than peace. Recognizing fear in your prayer life opens the door to genuine trust and alignment with God's will. Expectations about life, others, and God's timing are also shaped by fear. You may anticipate that things should happen a certain way, that people should respond as you hope, and that God should intervene on your schedule. When reality does not match these expectations, fear amplifies disappointment and uncertainty. This does not mean that you are failing. It means that fear is highlighting areas where trust and faith have not yet taken full authority over your heart. Allowing God to recalibrate these expectations helps release the tension and create space for obedience, courage, and freedom. It's crucial to recognize the opportunity that comes with admitting your fear. Fear is uncomfortable, but it is not a punishment. It is a signal, a guide, and a mirror reflecting areas in your heart that require honesty, surrender, and alignment with God. Each moment you confront fear is a chance to reclaim authority over your emotions, decisions, and spiritual practices. You can bring fear into the light, examine its influence, and intentionally choose trust. This is not easy. It is not quick, but it is transformative. God honors the courage it takes to confront fear because this is where true faith is cultivated. Acknowledging that you are carrying more fear than you admit is the first step toward freedom. The second step is deliberate action, identifying specific fears, bringing them into prayer, and allowing God's truth to replace the lies that have controlled your heart. Fear may have ruled quietly for years, but it does not have to continue. You can learn to recognize its presence, understand its subtle influence, and intentionally respond in ways that honor God and align with your purpose. Every small act of courage, every honest prayer, and every decision made in trust weakens fear's grip and strengthens your heart. Subscribe, like, and comment.